You're listening to The Problem with Poverty, a podcast that helps bring awareness to the causes and consequences of poverty, as well as ways that we can overcome the problems with poverty together. Our company, Community Action Partnership of North Alabama, serves 28 counties in our beautiful state. According to 2019 estimates by the U.S. Census, Alabama was the seventh poorest state, with 15.5% of its residents living in poverty, as compared with a U.S. average of 11.1%. Our goal with this show is to highlight all of the opportunities that we and our partners have to help people overcome poverty as we focus on helping people, changing lives.
Welcome to the Problem with Poverty podcast. I'm your host, Holly Hicks. Today we welcome Nathan Curry to discuss the concept of the digital divide. Nathan Curry is the Director of Technology for the Community Action Partnership of North Alabama. He has dedicated the past 19 years to the field of technology and business leadership. Since joining CAPNA, Nathan has led the transition to cloud-based applications with rigorous security standards to improve both internal and external communications. Nathan holds a BS in Information Technology Management, plus several industry certifications. Nathan also serves as the board president for Madison County Board of Education in North Alabama. Welcome, Nathan.
Glad to be here, Holly.
Let's start with an intro that describes the digital divide so our listeners understand what we're talking about. Investopedia describes the digital divide as the gap between demographics in regions that have access to modern information and communications technology and those that don't. So here are some key statistics about the digital divide. 1 in 10 Americans are offline, with a higher percentage of those 65 and older and those without a high school diploma being offline. 27% of low-income households have smartphones but not broadband, compared to 6% of high-income households. 39% of Americans living in rural areas lack access to decent broadband service, leaving 34 million people disconnected from digital life. This statistic matters in the context of digital divide statistics because it highlights the disparity between rural and urban areas in terms of access to broadband services. As a Director of Innovation and Technology at CAPNA, how does the digital divide contribute to what you believe is the problem with poverty?
That's a great question. So when I think about technology, I think about opportunity. I think about the ways that us people outside of poverty are able to achieve with technology. We can work more efficiently, and we can get things done quicker. We can also extend our capabilities, and technology provides all those resources. And so when you look at people in poverty, a lot of times they don't have those access, so they can extend. It provides those opportunity measures. For example, just last week, my son had a doctor's appointment. I scheduled everything online. I was able to upload my insurance card. I was able to do everything straight from my smartphone. When you have somebody who's in poverty, they may not have access to those resources, so everything takes longer. The call, you have to see if you can get somebody. Do you have insurance? All those steps become more difficult with people in poverty. And so to me, it opens up the gateway to extend your reach, your capabilities quicker. You're able to function at a higher level when you have access. My personal experience, I remember a time when I didn't have access. I remember a time where technology was relatively new, and I was excited, but I didn't have the funds or methods to be able to access. Thankfully, I was able to reach out to some people, some mentors of mine that gave me access to technology. And with that, I was able to extend and grow into the field. Had I not had those people reach out to me, I don't know if I would have even had access to the opportunities I have today. And so really, technology provides the opportunity to learn and to gain more information and to scale with speed everything in your life. And so that is why I think it's critical that our low-income families have the same access as our middle-income and our upper-income families when it comes to technology.
Well, let me ask you this, because you mentioned a mentor. Mm-hmm. People living in poverty, if they have lack of access, do you think they also have access to people like you had mentors to direct them and education to use the services and take advantage of the opportunities.
No, that's a huge gap. I think people in poverty, like other groups, they only know what they know, and it just doesn't germinate. I didn't just all of a sudden get access to this. It required, way back when I was even a teenager, having access to technology and having somebody walk me through the process. It just didn't spontaneously come by. I just didn't get a computer just show up at my desk. So they don't have it, and they won't get it unless somebody shows them. So to have processes and systems that allow them to come in, no judgment, learn some of these skills and tools are things that I believe Community Action can focus on, but other nonprofits that with a focus on digital literacy can focus on as well, because they don't have it. It just doesn't exist.
How receptive do you think people, if those opportunities are there, how receptive would people living in poverty be? Say, here's an opportunity to get some education on technology. Mm-hmm. This is how you can advance. Have you heard that there's a need in the communities, or do we assume that's what they want? So
in a former lifetime, it felt like I used to do some consulting. I did some consulting around Huntsville, and I did some training classes for some low-income seniors and also some younger folks. We did computer basics, logging in, some security basics, how to search for information. Believe it or not, once people in low income realized that you cared about what they were trying to accomplish and what they were trying to do, they were more than willing to open up, ask questions, dig deeper. So I think sometimes, and myself included, we make assumptions that they don't want to learn this, they're not equipped. I think it's setting the conditions that are proper for them to feel comfortable in asking questions and learning. So we have to get them closer to us so we can really start to understand them, meet them where they are, and go through the steps. And believe it or not, I haven't had a situation where they may come in skeptical. What's this about? What's this angle? But as you break down those barriers and as you start to understand them and as you start to learn them, they want the same things that all of us want. They want to be capable, they want to be equipped, they want to learn, and they want to grow. And in technology, it's one of the fastest ways to actually grow, and also grow in finances and skill set. Most of the things I learned, it was before I got my college degree. Most of the skill sets I acquired were also through just learning on the job. So it's one of those things that in technology, you can skill up relatively fast and actually earn income with those skills in a relatively fast amount of time. So if they knew that, if they heard that, I think that's an additional carrot that they would be willing to interested in taking.
And it sounds like from your observations that there's a pool of people that we're not tapping into just because they don't have the access and the opportunities.
Correct.
In 2018, the Digital Divide Council pointed out the top 5 digital divide solutions as being increasing affordability, empowering users, improving the relevance of online content, developing internet infrastructure, and addressing the gender gap in internet access. Would you agree or disagree with any or all of those?
I agree 100%.
So in the last 5 years, how have these 5 proposed solutions been implemented from your point of view, and how have they affected the digital divide, particularly for people in poverty?
Yeah, so it's been fairly, from a policy standpoint, it's been fairly dormant up until 2021. And so in 2021, you had the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, and a big part of the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, people think it's just about roads, bridges, which is critical. Electricity infrastructure, electric vehicle infrastructure, those things are things that they're looking at a policy at a federal level too. One big thing that they also focused on was the digital divide. and also particularly putting internet services, high-speed internet services, in low-income communities, because they identified that that's a huge gap. There's a learning gap, there's a misinformation gap, there's a whole bunch of gaps that if they don't have access where they can do their own vetting, will be exposed. And so the Infrastructure and Jobs Act in 2021 provides funding to internet service providers, to nonprofits for digital literacy, and also provides it for infrastructure. And so what we're doing as an agency is how can we leverage this opportunity? It may not come around again. How can we use this to help our low-income families? And how can we target some of our low-income families on digital literacy skills, and also job workforce skills that they can turn around and use to empower themselves and also have a high income output. And so we're in the process of formulating something right now that will allow somebody to go through a program, 6 to 8 month program, digital literacy, financial literacy, technology skills, and when they get done, we want to guarantee them to have a job making at least $50,000 a year. And that's going to be in a partnership with internet service providers, co-ops that provide internet services. These people have already identified what they need. They need network operations technicians. They need fiber optic technicians. They need call center technicians. And all these jobs pay anywhere from $20 to $35 an hour, which is a rich target for us. And so we want to empower those low-income families. Say, hey, look, you can learn these skills too. Just like Nathan can learn them, just like others can learn them. You have the capabilities of learning these same skills. And we want to make this a workforce opportunity for our low-income families.
So, say more about this program. How do people qualify, and what do they need going in, and what's the expectation when they come out?
A lot of great questions with that, and it's still germinating, I will say. But in my head, and as I kind of have some on paper, we have the data right now of our families. We will search through that data points. We'll try to find a targeted age group that we think would be identifiable for these jobs. We're going to make sure that is a diverse section of people. So whether it's racially diverse, we're going to make sure that. Gender diversity, we're going to make sure we include everybody in that. That's one thing that I have recognized in the technology services, in all the jobs I've had. There is limited diversity in the technology spaces. It's predominantly white, it's predominantly male. And that's okay, other than to say that, but I do know that all these other groups can learn at those high levels as well. And so they gravitate to that. Maybe it's childhood, maybe it's how they were raised, how they had access to technology. So good for them. But we think some of these other groups can also play at that same table. And so we're going to identify through systems that we already have. We're going to gauge interest. We're going to talk to them about the program. There are some requirements that we expect of them. We're going to tell them all the different steps we expect to learn. There'll be some financial literacy, because if you give anybody, but we're specifically talking about low-income families, you give a low-income individual a job making $50,000 a year, and you haven't covered financial literacy, you haven't covered soft skills, that may be a recipe for disaster for them, and it may put them in a worse situation than they were prior. And so what we're trying to do is not just give them the skills, but actually look at the other pieces. But anyway, we'll do our selection. We will partner with our community colleges and also our HBCU, Alabama A&M University. We will come up with a curriculum for them. We will walk through that curriculum. We're going to have a workforce development specialist that negotiates and works with these ISPs to say, hey, look, we have a candidate that is ready. We have this person's ready. They've been through all the training. They have these certifications, and they are prepared to go out in the field. One thing I heard, I went to a meeting in Coleman County about a month ago, and the marketing director and I think the chief operation officer for Sprout Internet, I believe is their group, they said they hire people off the street. They hired a young man off the street that the first time he got in a bucket truck, he quit. He quit because he didn't know he was afraid of heights. That's how green some of the people they're having to hire because of the deficit of quality candidates. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to give those folks like Sprout, like Joe Wheeler, like Charter, like Comcast, give them a high quality pool of candidates that happen to be low income. And they'll already be prepared. I mean, you obviously have your own training, but we have certain things that we can go ahead and equip them with and be ready so they can come into your organization prepared.
Is the funding for this program already established, or is that to be determined?
To be determined. So with the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, there are several grants available, particularly for nonprofits. ADECA is managing some of that. So what we do is we will link up with ADECA. We will tell them what our plan is, and they can help us determine which funds we need to write for. So the goal is to lay out what our plans are, get a deck at the table, and they'll help us through that process. But the funds, we believe, nationwide, it's about $48 billion coming from infrastructure. So roughly about a little less than $1 billion per state. The majority of that is going to be internet services, broadband infrastructure, but there is still a sizable piece for digital literacy and workforce development. So our goal is to tap into that piece and have a comprehensive plan that I believe will be well received by DECA, be well received by the federal grant, that they will be willing to say, hey, look, this is a program that we would appreciate be stood up. And a benefit to it is we do it right and we do it well, this can be replicated through other, doesn't have to be technology services, although I love tech. It could be a nursing program. It could be other programs that we do with this same goal, taking low-income families, equipping them with skills, and putting them in the workforce with high income earnings so they can change that generational poverty. They can look at, they'll be the last, or their family be the last ones to suffer from this generational poverty that we're dealing with. So that's the goal. We're going to start with 15. That's the goal, to start with 15 individuals. And if we can do that right, then I think it will expand and grow.
Well, to play the devil's advocate, I'll go to the other side and ask you, what are some obstacles that you see to preventing the closing of the digital divide?
Obstacles. I think there's and thankfully we have some legislation that will help this, I think, but there's still going to be, there's got to be a business case for companies to invest in these rural communities. There's a lot of money that it costs, and they just don't see the opportunity. Like, why would I run fiber optic cable to rural Holly Pond area that's not already served for 3 low-income families? What benefit does that help me at all? So you have the technical requirements from the ISP that they just may not want to do it. And we have to implore them to say, hey, look, every family needs to be connected. From a competitive marketplace standpoint, there are people out there that are like, why? We want these jobs to stay with these clusters of people. And so when you start talking about helping families in low income, I would suspect that we will have a group or groups of people that say, why? Why are we doing this? My argument to that is that, everybody deserves a chance at this new digital revolution. Everybody deserves an opportunity to succeed in this new digital economy. And the more you have at the table, the more robust the American economy will be. But there are some obstacles. There are families who have time commitments. Like, look, I don't have time. I'm using my computer to do what I need to do, period. I don't want to learn any new skills. So we will have to press upon some folks too. But I think it's more wins and more potential opportunities than not in this situation.
So it sounds like, from what you said, the return on investment is not obvious to everybody.
Right.
But there is one, whether direct or indirect. Directly, it employs people, improves the economic situation in your community. Indirectly, it helps lower the poverty rate. And with the community connected, then I'm rambling. With everyone connected, you expand opportunities beyond what you originally planned.
That's
so now
correct.
we reach more rural areas, give more opportunities, higher training, better education, and keep building the workforce beyond the initial come to our program.
That's correct. So the goal is opportunity. The goal is to these families in low income deserve opportunities just like anybody else. What you see, sometimes poverty and generational poverty starts with a lack of opportunity. And so our goal is let's reverse that. When you look at any type of historical significance, and whether it's out in the Midwest and you see all these factories that had opportunity went away, generational poverty came up, it began. And there's other factors, but the absence of opportunity builds poverty. And so the goal is to create opportunity so we can reduce, not eliminate. I think poverty will always exist, but our clients may look different because some of them have moved out of it. Our goal is to, I would say, hopefully eventually put ourselves out of business because we provide so much opportunity and so much utility to our low-income families where we're only needed for new clients. The rest of them are good to go.
Which meets the mission, provide opportunities to help people overcome poverty.
There you go.
Well, let me ask you some FAQs that listeners may have. There is free Wi-Fi everywhere. Why can't people just use that?
So, free Wi-Fi, nothing's free, first of all. So when you jump on a free Wi-Fi network, you don't know what the security requirements are. You don't know what the speed and performance is. And so a lot of times you're just using something that's second tier or third tier quality-wise. So you can use it. I mean, it might be good in a pinch, but it is not a quality enough that you can actually run a business, establish a skill. I mean, because as soon as you start skilling up in it, maybe it drops from 10 megabits per second to 1.5. So free internet, and then from a cyber standpoint, we have seen time and time again in this country where you go to an airport and you say Huntsville free Wi-Fi. Well, a bad actor can also create on a laptop a Wi-Fi network and call it Huntsville free Wi-Fi 2. Well, people don't differentiate and they join it, and this person is siphoning off your packets, your data. They see everything coming across their Wi-Fi network. So it's an inherent security risk when you're walking around joining these free Wi-Fi networks. Not only are they not fast, they're not secure, and a lot of cases they're not really efficient. So yeah, free is not really free.
Well, I want to backtrack on something you said that stood out to me. When you mentioned a business owner, you can't run a business with free Wi-Fi.
Right.
That makes me ask, if there are more opportunities, do you see small businesses growing in underserved areas now once the opportunity is there and the service is provided? How does that look to you, say in 5 years, if you put in broadband and access to those areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you put broadband, let's just take an area like Bridgeport or Stevenson over in Jackson County. Some of them around the 72 corridor, right along that, you have internet services through Charter, and I believe Charter is the provider out there. But out in the reaches, there's hardly nothing. I can imagine a time where individuals have access. They know what they're doing with the technology they have, and they can stand up an e-commerce business. They can. A lot of people out here got Crickets. They make stuff. I've seen so much stuff on Etsy and all this. They do all this cool stuff, but there's a key ingredient that they have. Most of the time they're in cities. Most of the time they have high-speed connections. So these people out in these rural areas, if they had high-speed connections, they have the skill to build these things. A lot of times they're going to a trade day, a flea market, or whatever. They can extend their business right from the comfort of their home if they had the access, if they had the capabilities.
More economic development, more workforce development. Here's a question we ask every guest to help listeners understand the overall effects of poverty. What does someone living in poverty have to do with me, and why should I care?
There is a correlation on a selfish level. There's a correlation between poverty and crime. And so if you look at it as just full selfishly, I don't want people committing crimes around me. So you should care about poverty because generational poverty can breed crime. And so you want your society, your community to be safe. You want people to be kind. You should care. These people need our help so they don't turn into future criminal elements of society. But I just believe on just a human level, I believe that I believe in the good book, and the poor among us should be cared for. And I think it's incumbent upon us to look at the poor as people that we should help and we should care for, because we all could be in that same situation. We could all be. We're one step away from poverty. When I was growing up, my dad was in the military, family of 6, and he was an E3, E4. We were technically in poverty. He had to go to Kenya one time, and so we stayed back while he was going to Kenya because they wouldn't let the service members' families go, and we qualified to live in a housing project. And so seeing how people in poverty have the same goals, a lot of my friends are in the project, seeing we all had to, and we were there temporarily, but I saw how people looked at us and judged people in poverty, even though we were just the same. When people would come, who would come house by house, trying to sign us up for food stamps and all this assistance, just the looks that we would receive, like, oh, y'all just like the rest of them. And I was a teenager and preteen, and I remember how that made me feel. And it didn't make me feel like these people truly cared about me. It made me feel like they were judging me. And I think a lot of people in poverty feel that same thing. They feel like that these systems, a lot of systems are judgmental, and they're not designed to help them get out their situation. They're just designed to give them something and just placate them and just move on. And, it made me feel like it wasn't, it probably made my mother feel like, this is not who we are. We're just in this circumstance. The military didn't pay enough for my dad to give us an apartment or something somewhere. So we had to live here. But it was a temporary thing for us. But you guys were treating us as if we were the scum of the earth. And so that feeling, I think a lot of people in poverty feel that way. And that's not right.
So who do you believe holds the responsibility for overcoming poverty? Is it the individual or family? Is it the community? Is it the government? All three? Something else?
Yeah, I hold it to the feet of all three. Obviously, the individual has the most responsibility. But sometimes the individual, by no circumstance of their own, is placed in a situation where they're in impoverished situations. Most of us do not move far away from where we were originally raised. Well, if I was raised in Detroit or somewhere in the 60s, and my father worked at Ford Motor Company, well, I'm thinking, okay, when I get older, I'm going to work at Ford Motor Company. Well, they shut down the factory. We're not moving. We have become poor in an instant. And we're not going to just pick up and say, you know what, I'm going where the jobs are. No, a lot of us don't do that. So I think it's the family. I think it's the systems. I think some of it is government policy that doesn't encourage a tiered approach where families can still get services even when they are over income on a sliding basis, so they don't feel like they have to move back. They can continue to progress. I think all of us play a part in this, but the family plays the biggest part.
Nathan Curry, you've given us a lot to think about the digital divide and things that we all can do to make it better for people living in poverty. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Holly.